Ever since I was a little kid, my parents have always showered me with love. Both my dad and mom were incredibly kind. They bought me lots of girly clothes and toys. Growing up surrounded by so much love and affection, I found myself turning into a girl who loved fashion, wearing my favorite clothes, and having an outgoing personality. I made many friends in kindergarten and elementary school. One day, I was looking at a family album with my mom. A photo caught my eye. In the picture, there was my mother dressed in a pure white gown, looking just like a princess. "Mom, this is so beautiful. What kind of dress is this?" I asked. "That, sweetie, is a wedding dress. It's a special and super stylish dress that women wear only on their wedding day," my mother replied. My eyes sparkled as I exclaimed, "I want to wear a wedding dress too." My mother gently stroked my hair, her eyes filled with tenderness, and said, "I hope you get to wear one someday." Looking back as an adult, it's a bit embarrassing, but in my elementary school anthology on the theme of my dreams, I wrote, "I want to wear a wedding dress." I was quite the romantic back then. Growing up, I was surrounded by warmth and love from not only my parents, but also from many caring people, and I had a very comfortable life. But one spring day in my second year of junior high, a sudden tragedy happened. My parents were involved in a car accident while they were out shopping. At the time, I was in the middle of a club activity at school, as I was a member of the crafts club. My teacher arranged a taxi to take me to the hospital, but when I got there, I was met with the cruel news. Both my father and mother had passed away. The accident was caused by a drunk truck driver and resulted in the deaths and injuries of 6 other people, in addition to my parents. It made headlines for days, and I remember reporters coming to me for interviews. To be honest, I don't have a clear memory of the time right after the accident, but people told me I was in denial and cried endlessly. Eventually, it was decided that I couldn't be left alone as a junior high student. So after some discussions among relatives, it was decided that I would live with my paternal relatives for the remainder of my junior high years and with my maternal relatives during high school. Looking back, it might have been a blessing in disguise that I had relatives who could take care of my basic needs, but it wasn't easy for me to adjust to a new environment, especially after losing my parents. Most importantly, I never had the time to truly heal from the grief of losing my parents. At first, the relatives who took me in showed me sympathy, but then they started saying things like, "How long are you going to keep crying? We're letting you stay here, so maybe you could show some gratitude. Even if you can't work, you can at least do some house chores, can't you?" I knew I should be thankful to them for taking care of a teenager with a lot of sensitive feelings. Thinking about it now, I realized they had a point, but at the time, those words made me feel truly alone. Even if they were family, it reminded me that at the end of the day, they were not my immediate family but outsiders. From then on, I learned to do various household chores. I even quit the club activities I loved so much to come home early and help with dinner preparations and other tasks. One time when I washed the dishes without permission and put them away, I don't know where the dishes went. Everything has its own designated place. I was scolded by her. Since then, I made sure to ask the head of the household before touching anything. Once I moved to another relative's house for high school, I started working part-time jobs and gave some of my earnings to my relatives as a token of gratitude. Before I knew it, I no longer thought about fashion, which I used to love so much. I felt it would be rude to ask for more while being a burden on my relatives. I subconsciously began to suppress my desires and wishes. I even realized that I was smiling less. After graduating high school, I moved to New York and went to college using student loans. I started living on my own. Even though I had a scholarship, expenses like rent and utility bills were no joke. So I looked for a well-paying part-time job and ended up working at an Italian bar close to my college. During the day, I attended lectures, and at night, I worked. Ever since I lost my parents, I had been very lonely, but I deliberately kept myself busy every day to avoid any chances of reminiscing about the sad memories. One day, I upset a customer at my job. Apparently, my expressionless and mechanical way of working had offended them. "A woman should be charming. Didn't your parents teach you that? Your parents must have been worthless." Those words about my parents left me in shock. Fear, shock, and feelings of inferiority swirled within me. That's when a male colleague who'd been there for 2 years stood up for me. "Our staff member deeply apologizes, but to criticize our staff's parents whom you don't even know, that makes me question your upbringing as well, don't you think?" The customer left in a huff. "Are you okay, Emmy? Don't let it get to you too much." His name was Jake, 5 years older than me. Jake comforted me gently, but at that moment he felt like someone who was defending my parents, and I was so overwhelmed with gratitude that I started crying. Jake let me take a break in the lounge until I calmed down. I grew up with a single parent, too, so I understand how hard it can be when someone talks about your parents. His kind words resonated with my heart. Before I knew it, I was telling him about not having my parents around. "I see you've probably been through so much more than me with that." He showed genuine concern and empathy for my situation. From that day on, I started having feelings for the kind-hearted Jake, and eventually I found myself falling for him. Taking a leap of faith, I confessed my feelings and we started dating. On our first date, at Jake's suggestion, I went into a clothing store for the first time in ages. "You look great in cute clothes, Amy." For the first time in a while, I saw a stylish reflection of myself in the mirror. Jake's smiling face was right there beside mine. The time spent with him started feeling the void in my heart. Indeed, despite my painful past, I found myself able to laugh genuinely when I was with Jake, and on our 3rd anniversary, Jake proposed to me. "Once you graduate, will you be mine?" I was over the moon. From the bottom of my heart, I wanted to marry him, so I accepted the proposal. After that, on Jake's suggestion, I started living with his family. Jake's mother, Catherine, was a very kind woman. However, I had always lived with relatives, so I felt out of place and always thought I should help out in some way. Seeing this, she said, "You don't need to be so formal." Knowing both Jake and I had jobs and I was busy with my college thesis and work, she always cooked delicious meals for us. Perhaps because Jake and I worked at an Italian place, she often made us American comfort food. Her homemade dishes were simple but delicious. She treated me like her own daughter, and I always offered to help around the house. Whenever I did, I'd ask her, "I'm thinking of doing the dishes next, is that okay?" Although I felt her kindness, I guess my mother noticed that I wasn't completely studious. Almost a year later, I graduated from college and secured a position in the general administrative section of a renowned company. As I settled into my new environment, Jake and I began discussing our wedding plans. My mother-in-law was as thrilled as if it were her own wedding. I felt like the misfortunes of my past were fading, replaced by the hope of a happy future. Just as I was overwhelmed with joy, tragedy struck me again. The news came that while Jake, who had gone out to stock up on kitchen supplies, was involved in a car accident and never came back. Both my mother-in-law and I were in such shock that we couldn't believe it, but the tears just wouldn't stop. As the days went by, my mother-in-law became more and more consumed by grief. However, as time passed, I began to move beyond the initial shock. Another car accident, both my parents and Jake, every person I deeply love seems to get involved in a car accident and passes away. I started to think that maybe I was the cause and fell into a deep depression. Seeing my mother-in-law in such pain, I continuously apologized to her, all because I fell in love with Jake. My thoughts were no longer that of an ordinary grieving person. It felt like I was on a path to destruction. Perhaps I had truly lost my sanity. Even though my mother-in-law had lost her beloved son and was going through a heart-wrenching time, she was still worried about me, looking worn out and devastated. "Amy, this was such a tragic accident. You shouldn't blame yourself," she said. It's too much for one person to bear, right? I'm equally devastated. Let's share our grief together, she added. Despite her own unimaginable shock of losing her son, she acted strong for me, and just like always, she served warm food for me. Seeing her go to such lengths for me, I instinctively started to function mechanically based on my past experiences, so I went back to how it was before I met Jake, diligently going to work, doing household chores, and burying my sorrow in business. I didn't even notice the worried looks Catherine gave me, watching my smile fade away. One day I realized that she was coming home later than me. "Annie, I'm sorry I'm late," she said. "I bought some takeout from the supermarket." That's when I noticed that she hadn't cooked for me for about a month. I thought she might have gotten tired of me. I can't trouble Catherine anymore, I thought. I secretly started to plan on moving out of the house. Then, one evening, Catherine told me she wanted to talk. "Amy, are you free next weekend? I'd like us to go out together," she said. It was an unexpected question, but I thought it'd be a good opportunity for us to talk, so I agreed. On the day of our outing, even though we chatted about trivial things, I could see a hint of tension in her expression. I was taken aback when she led me to a bridal shop. I was confused. Then, Catherine began to speak with a hint of apology. When Jake passed away, while I was sorting out his belongings in our room, I stumbled upon your graduation yearbook. "I know I shouldn't have, but I looked inside," she said. In it, my future dream was written as wearing a wedding dress. Catherine told me she had been planning a wedding event for me to make that dream come true. That was the reason she had been out and hadn't cooked for the past few months. Seeing me live each day as if my heart was shattered, she couldn't bear it. She wanted to do something for me. She had seen a story on the news about a woman who held a wedding ceremony after her fiancé passed away. Though she worried it might be overstepping, she planned this, thinking it might help me move forward in some way. She told me I was free to decide whether to have the wedding and whether to wear the wedding dress. Then she added, "I might be overly intrusive, but you know, a wedding isn't meant to bind you. You've been through a lot, Emmy. You're so used to suppressing your feelings, but if you don't face your grief and sort out your emotions, I fear one day your heart might break," she said. Through her words, I understood how much she cared for me. "The reason I wanted you to wear the wedding dress was simply as a starting point. I wanted you to make one dream come true, use that as a milestone, and then face your emotions head on. I hope you can move on and live your life," she explained. "That's the wish I had in my heart when I organized this for you." I was moved by my Mill's feelings and emotions, and tears naturally came to my eyes. "Catherine, Catherine," she hugged me gently, crying with me. "Emmy, just remember this. I'm truly saddened by what happened to my son, but I genuinely love you, who my son chose, as if you were my own daughter." On this day, I wore the special and super stylish dress I had dreamed of since I was in elementary school, and later, I had a wedding ceremony with the late Jake. At the wedding, I broke down in tears, releasing all the pent-up emotions. My Mill cried with me. The wedding, as my Mill said, gave me a sense of closure. From this day on, I truly felt a strong bond, just like that of a parent and child with my Mill. She became another mother to me, then someone I can consult without hesitation, a truly important figure in my life. Lately, my Mill has been asking if maybe it's time for me to find someone new. I'm not ready to think about dating yet, but I want to start moving forward in my life, little by little.